This is All India Radio. In the program Insight, now we bring you an exclusive interview with Ashok Gulati, Chair Professor for Agriculture at Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, on the book Modi at 20, Dreams Meet Delivery. The interviewer is Harvir Singh, Senior Journalist.
Professor Gulati, it's interesting, this book, Modi at 20, Dreams Meet Delivery. And you have written this chapter on agriculture, Modi model in Gujarat, the success story of agriculture in his tenure as a Gujarat Chief Minister, and then as Prime Minister, you have analyzed his tenure at national level also. So, Professor Gulati, your chapter title is Agriculture Good but Can Be Better. Can you throw some light on this theme of your chapter?
Well, let's divide it into two parts. One, Modi ji's tenure as Chief Minister of Gujarat. That I would term as an agrarian miracle, because if we take the base of 2001-2, because he came into power in 2002, and 2001-2, if we take the base and go up to 13-14, which was his last year as Chief Minister, you find that agriculture in Gujarat grew at the rate of 9.2% per annum. This is nothing short of a miracle. No other state, perhaps in the history of Indian agriculture, has grown for 13 years at this rate, annual average growth rate in agriculture. And on top of this, the overall GDP was growing at 9.8% per annum. So I would call this Sone Pe Suhaga. Agriculture is a big challenge because it engages the largest number of people, and their growth in income and overall GDP growth, that is nothing short of a miracle. And I would say we need to know the process through which he did that and what lessons it can hold for many other states of India.
So you have divided Prime Minister Modi's tenure into two parts, reviewing the agricultural achievements. So one in Gujarat is 2001 to 2013-14, and then 2014 to 2021. So as you said that Gujarat gives a very good growth in that tenure, 9.2%, and that is a very big thing in agriculture. So what kind of strategy or the initiative taken by Mr. Modi in his tenure as a Chief Minister to get this kind of growth?
So I think we need to go a little deeper to decipher the process, what led to this miraculous growth in agriculture, 9.2% per annum. A few things that I can say. One, the external environment, the access to new technology. When we decompose the growth, we looked at the largest chunk of growth was coming from Saurashtra region, which earlier was lagging behind, and they adopted the new technology of BT cotton. In fact, Vajpayee sir was the one who had cleared the first GM crop in the country in 2002, and Gujarat farmers lapped up that technology. And then the cotton revolution that took place in Gujarat, and then it spread to other states of India. And by 2013-14, India was the largest producer of cotton in the world and second largest exporter of cotton in the world. So access to technology and access to markets is the mantra for growth in agriculture. And how Modi ji did the magic was he launched something called Krishi Mahotsav, where all the agriculture departments and all those extension workers for 1 month just before the Kharif crop would go to all the villages. There were about 360 odd Krishi Raths, and to demonstrate the latest technologies that was coming in. And he himself used to launch that in front of lakhs of farmers. This is what the technologies scientists had, but they never used to reach at the land to the farmers. Through Krishi Mahotsav, he mobilized the masses and forced literally not just the bureaucracy and agriculture scientists of the government to go to the villages to demonstrate the strength of their technologies, but he also invited the private sector. So private sector found that a big vehicle to demonstrate their technologies. So he ensured that the latest technologies in different crops reached the remote test villages of Gujarat. And when farmers were aware of those technologies and they started adopting it, and that led to a massive revolution. Another interesting thing that he did was focused on water. He established something called Gujarat Green Revolution Company in the government, and he emphasized two, three things. One was the drip irrigation, on which literally 70% subsidy was given. And the second was check dams. Hundreds of thousands of check dams were established all over Gujarat. Then he launched a campaign, Khet Talavadi, where he asked each farmer 5% of his cultivable land to make a little tank there so that when it rains, it can catch the rain and recharge the groundwater. It's amazing when all over India the groundwater table had been going down, but in Gujarat in 2004, 97 talukas were only safe for groundwater irrigation. But by 2013, 175 talukas, which was literally 78% of the sample that was drawn all over Gujarat, they were safe. So I think more crop from every drop of water, that is ingrained in his mind and which was reflected in all the initiatives. So this is something we need to know, not just having big reservoirs and canal irrigation and flood irrigation. We must utilize our water very, very carefully, and the same water can give you double or triple the output.
As you mentioned, that BT technology was one of the big things to transform cotton production scenario in Gujarat. Other states also adopted around the same time when first time in Vajpayee government allowed BT seeds to be sown. Varieties were released. And Maharashtra and Andhra were also part of this variety to use, and even after that Punjab and northern India. How these other states were not able to match the productivity level or to achieve a better growth? What was the reason behind that?
You know, this is very interesting question that you have asked. Gujarat focused on giving irrigation. Today, almost 60% of cotton being grown in Gujarat is irrigated, compared to only 3% cotton area being irrigated in Maharashtra. So the productivity levels in Maharashtra are almost half of those in Gujarat. That is the big difference. So the seed can be the same, but if you don't have assured irrigation, then you can't apply proper fertilization and your yields remain very low. I think seed is a miracle, but that needs to be supplemented by proper irrigation and proper fertilization, and only then it can give you better productivity, higher productivity. But when productivity goes up, you need markets. Otherwise, the prices will collapse here. So you need to keep the borders open for exports. If your domestic industry cannot absorb, you must get the best markets globally. And that is what happened during that period, which led to a massive change and transformation in Gujarat, but not as much in other states.
Professor Gulati, if you go to the second part of your chapter, basically the tenure Mr. Modi is playing as a Prime Minister and in agriculture, you mentioned that at national level, the growth is 3.5% and the previous aim was 3.2%. So here there is not a very big difference basically in terms of numbers. So how do you see this?
You know, when you are a chief minister, then the sector is fully under your control, because agriculture is largely a state subject. Although Green Revolution and even Milk Revolution were brought by the strategy advised at the center. So even Cotton Revolution, the policy decision was taken at the center. So center can do a lot of things, but then at the end of the round, it is up to the chief ministers of various states. How do they implement those policies? Mr. Modi did try to get into that in a mode starting with, when he became the Prime Minister, there were 2 years of successive droughts, 2014, 15 and 15, 16. And despite that, if you look at the growth rate achieved during the Modi period, marginally higher than what the long-term trends had been before that, but not anything miraculous. And that's because all other states need to pitch in. One, onto the access of best technologies and Krishi Mahotsav type extension campaign. Secondly, the focus on water. Although at the center, they did try to list about 99 major projects in which they said that, there will be no dearth of money and we must complete these projects as early as possible. And quite a bit of that achievement was made. As a result, some irrigation has increased.
Professor Gulati, I want to come to this question. You are a supporter of liberal policies and you support reforms in agriculture sector. So Modi government tried this in 2020 and through these three farm laws. Can you comment on it, because you are basically in favor and your chapter also mentioned this, that it was an effort made by this government to reform agriculture sector?
My stand on that is very clear, that farmers should have the freedom to adopt the best technologies in the world so long as they are safe, and they must have access to the best markets in the world, both domestically as well as internationally. Only then the real meaning of economic freedom to the farmer will come. You know, we may celebrate our Independence Day as a political freedom, but the economic freedom is still a challenge. Today, after 1991, the reforms were basically delicensing and, on the industry side and trade policy reforms, they were gradually moving towards freedom, right, of the industry. But they never talked about agriculture reforms. So Modi government did try to go towards freedom, giving freedom to the farmers in terms of their choices where they want to sell their produce. If you look at the situation assessment survey of the farmers 2018-19, showed that less than 10% of the farmers in the country have gained from MSP regime, and less than 10% of the agriculture produce has got any benefit from MSP regime. So we need to get the markets right, and these farm laws were a step towards that. But I feel because of lack of communication or miscommunication and certain political interests trying to derail this thing, Modi government had to withdraw that. But this process of opening up the markets will not stop. Sooner or later, in some form or the other, it has to come, because that's the basic right of the farmers.
So, Professor Gulati, the marginal farmers are almost 85%. So, can full market-driven economy can work in India? There are a lot of talks about doubling farmers' income. How do you see these points?
So, doubling of farm income has to increase by 2-3 steps. One, the productivity must go up. And second is diversification towards high-value agriculture. High-value agriculture, same hectare, when you're growing vegetables or you're growing fruits, can give you 3 times more income than growing rice or wheat or coarse cereals.
So, if I want to make a question, Professor Gulati, this dream meets delivery narrative, because the vision or doubling farmers' income, the thing you want to see for Indian agriculture in coming years.
The time was announced in 2016, 28th of February. And the target was within 7 years to double the real income of the farmers. Now that has not doubled. We have achieved only 40%, 45% of the target. I think we have to think out of the box. And one idea that I can put on the table is, besides the diversification, which is a slow process because infrastructure and the markets need to develop along with that. And it will take time, especially after the withdrawal of these farm laws. It is going to take even a bit longer time. But one thing, the way Prime Minister Modi said, Har Ghar Tiranga, I would love to see him campaigning, Har Khet Mein Ek Solar Power Plant. If on 1 acre you can put in 400 to 500 solar trees while you can keep growing 2 crops down below, then farmers can easily earn 60,000-70,000 rupees more on top of what they are earning today on per acre basis. So his slogan, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan, Jai Anusandhan. This Jai Anusandhan, so that type of innovation to create solar as a third crop for the farmer, which can give him income throughout the year, even when there is a drought and the crops below fail.
Professor Gulati, thank you very much. And you have concluded very well that Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan, and one solar every field. Thank you very much for joining this discussion.
Thank you for having me.
You were listening to an exclusive interview with Ashok Gulati, Chair Professor for Agriculture at India, Council for Research on International Economic Relation, on the book Modi at 20, Dreams Meet Delivery. The interviewer was Harvir Singh, Senior Journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio.